start off with 9, then we get down to the 6 that make the playoffs, and then it goes down to 4. And now we're down to the final 2, as here we are, Grey Cup week. Here I am on the road, checked into my hotel room at the Coliseum Inn here in Edmonton for the 106th Grey Cup, and as a Stampeder fan, I always don on my red either way for playing in it or not. This year, we just happened to be in it. So I figured as I hit the road here and checked in my room here, why not get my 106th Grey Cup preview video out a day early, as I had time to go over the notes and figure out my decision on who I ultimately think will win the 106th Grey Cup, as I was on the bus on the way here from Calgary. So anyway, let's bring up my notes here to break down how we got here to the 106th Grey Cup here in Edmonton. So let's bring up my notes here on Google Docs. Same format I'll use for all my other previews from the semifinals to the finals and now ultimately the final here. So if you followed those videos, it should be a fairly similar format where I'll break down each facet of the game for both sides, where we think has an edge, and given that this game's played outside, give the weather forecast, and then I'll make my pick-em style on how much confidence I have on this team winning. So let's begin here, shall we? So as we know, the 106th Grey Cup is here in Edmonton. It'll be played on Sunday, November 25th at the Brick Field at Commonwealth Stadium, 4 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff. And obviously the winner of this game claims the Grey Cup. And it will feature the Calgary Stampeders representing the West and the Ottawa RedBlacks representing the East. So how did we get here? Well, in the Eastern Final first, happened last week, TD Place Stadium, 11 a.m. kickoff, Mountain Time. The Ottawa RedBlacks really dominated offensively against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as the Ottawa RedBlacks beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats 46-27. And this was definitely a big day for Trevor Harris and the Ottawa RedBlacks, because listen to these numbers. These are, almost perfect Tom Brady numbers here, because Trevor Harris, he was 29 for 32, 367 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's a new Ottawa football record. Past Russ Jackson, who had 4 touchdown passes in a playoff game. So Trevor Harris has solidified himself in Ottawa football history. Greg Ellingson, the receiver, led away with 6 catches, 144 yards and a touchdown. And William Powell had a solid game on the ground, 21 carries, 86 yards on the ground. And then on top of that, the Ottawa defense had 3 interceptions, one by Rose, one Coffey, and one by Baltimore. So it was definitely an all-around offensive showdown, and the defense showed up when they needed to. So look at the Hamilton side of the ball there. They definitely couldn't counteract Ottawa's offense here. I mean, Jeremiah Mazzoli, he was 28 for 41. Still threw 315 yards, but he had 1 touchdown, but those 3 interceptions I mentioned from the Ottawa defenders. And Braylon Addison continued his playoff breakout for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as he had 12 catches for 129 yards. So maybe Hamilton Tiger Cats have found someone to build around for next season, and imagine him, Addison, with Luke Tasker and Brandon Banks, and they'll definitely make a dynamic receiving core if they bring them all back next season. Although the one storyline here that still continued to be a storyline here for the Grey Cup is that Jonathan Rose, yes, he did pick up an interception, but he also shoved an official and was ejected from the game. And the league decided to suspend him for the Grey Cup. But Jonathan Rose is appealing, and as it actually was said at the coaches' conference that they have at the Grey Cup, that Rick Cubble has intended to play him if if he's eligible. So that could be one big key player right there. But that's what happened in the Eastern Final. It was all Ottawa all the time. Trevor Harris solidified himself in Ottawa football history. So the Ottawa RedBlacks are off to the 106th Grey Cup. Third time in 4 years that Ottawa, since they rejoined the CFL, has played for the championship game. So now let's get to the Western Final. That was played at 2:30 kickoff at McMahon Stadium last Sunday, November 18th. The Calgary Stampeders beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 22-14 here. How I'd summarize this game is that the Calgary Stampeders had a strong defensive game, but they had timely offense when they needed the most here, including the go-ahead touchdown to give Calgary a 10-point lead with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, which, it was pretty much a tight game up to that point. Winnipeg was hanging around, but as we break down the numbers here, there was some highlights for everybody here on the Calgary Stampeders, and only one player really stood out for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers here. So on Calgary side of the ball, Bo was 17 for 31, 214 yards, an okay average game, but 3 touchdown catches. And Eric Rogers had 6 catches for those 3 touchdowns on 61 yards, and it definitely was a very beautiful day in the neighborhood for Mr. Rogers here. And then John Jackson, he had a solid, other than one fumble that he had early in the second half. He still had a pretty solid game, but 14 carries, 83 yards, and actually that was the only turnover in that game, was that fumble there. And then the defense definitely stood up for the Calgary Stampeders like they have all season long. Alex Singleton had 7 tackles, and Jagger Davis seems to love play the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home here. Had another 2-sack game, and Micah Johnson also added in with 1 sack here. And then that was pretty much who stood up for the Calgary Stampeders. Winnipeg Blue Bombers, all I can really say is that Justin Medlock scored 4 field goals this game. And then the other 2 points that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers got was a safety that Rob Baver conceded for field position here. But, Justin Medlock, Winnipeg actually was up 6-0 after the first quarter, and the offense was moving the ball there, but enough for Justin Medlock to get a field goal. He actually started the game with a 57-yarder there, which was quite incredible to see. Teeing up past the 55-yard line there, and he still made it through. But the guys the big key offensive players didn't really outshine Calgary's offensive players for the game. Nichols, he actually was 15 for 32 for only 158 yards. Andrew Harris, actually traditionally he has a rougher game against Calgary, and he had 13 carries for 71 yards. So actually Don Jackson outran Andrew Harris in this game. And then Darvin Adams, the receiver for Winnipeg, led the way with 5 catches for 64 yards. But unfortunately, this was not the year for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So the Calgary Stampeders advanced to the Grey Cup. And for the second time in 3 years, the Calgary Stampeders take on the Ottawa RedBlacks. So there could be some revenge here, or maybe the Ottawa RedBlacks could be champions again for the second time in 3 years. But that's what's the marquee matchup right now, is the Calgary Stampeders and the Ottawa RedBlacks. So let's revisit the records here for each team. As the Ottawa RedBlacks were 11-7, first in the East, while the Calgary Stampeders were first in the West with a 13-5 record. Ottawa RedBlacks were 6-3 at home. Calgary Stampeders 7-2 on the road, and then we're at home, both home records. So on the road, the Ottawa RedBlacks were 5-4 on the road, while the Calgary Stampeders were 6-3 on the road there. And then record against the West here, this is where you'll see big disparity here, especially strength of the divisions there. The West was definitely much stronger than the East. The Ottawa RedBlacks were 5-5 versus the West. While the Calgary Stampeders were actually a perfect 8-0 against the East. And as I keep saying, the winner of this game claims the Grey Cup here. So let's rewind back in the season series here. You got to go way, way, way back to pretty much the start of the year for both of these teams, because they played each other very early in the season. So in week 3, the Calgary Stampeders were hosting the Ottawa RedBlacks, and the Calgary Stampeders won that game 24-14. Well, I highlight that game as it was pretty much a defensive game, but the Calgary Stampeders pulled away in the fourth quarter. And who stood up for this game? I mean, Bo was 19 for 35, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Don Jackson, the running back, 15 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. And then for receiving here, Tavares Daniels led the way with 5 catches and 91 yards, and Kamar Jordan and Eric Rogers had a touchdown catch each. And the defense definitely won the game over. It was a balanced attack, which couldn't really find any stats that really stood out for this game, but definitely affected Trevor Harris and company here, because Trevor Harris, the quarterback for the Ottawa RedBlacks in this week 3 game, he was 13 for 29, only threw for 135 yards and an interception. Well, William Powell actually still had a pretty good game individually. In 13 carries, he had 123 yards, so he's definitely still a threat on the ground there. And then Greg Allenson had 6 catches, 97 yards for a touchdown here. So Greg Allenson had much of Trevor Harris's yards in that game. So that definitely set the tone for a Week 5 matchup, where this time the Ottawa RedBlacks were hosting the Calgary Stampeders, and the Calgary Stampeders defense definitely had their way with the Ottawa RedBlacks this game, as the Calgary Stampeders beat the Ottawa RedBlacks 27-3 at TD Place Stadium. And this was definitely, I'm going to say, the low point, the worst game of the season for the Ottawa RedBlacks, and I'm going to say this was the high point for Calgary's defense, because they smothered Ottawa's offensive attack. It was non-existent in this game. Bo Levi Mitchell actually had a great first half, and I'll specify why he only played in the first half here. He was 16 for 21, 166 yards, and 1 touchdown, but he actually took a little hit from Danny Mason there on his, and he had to, for precautionary measures, he was taken out of the game. I'm sure if this, let's say this was the Grey Cup, hypothetically then, I think Bo Levi Mitchell probably would have played the whole game, but you know, it was early in the season. Calgary's defense was having their way with the Ottawa RedBlacks. That this was actually a game that the backup quarterback Nick Arbuckle got some time in, and he did all right in the second half. He was 8 for 14, 8 for 14 for 84 yards and threw for a touchdown. And then Don Jackson had a great game on the ground, 15 carries, 102 yards. And then Michael Johnson highlighted the defensive attack for the Ottawa RedBlacks with 3 sacks. And I remember this TSN game, they just gave the game ball to the whole Calgary defense. So this is definitely would be a game that Devon Claybrooks would put on his mantle here. And we definitely had their way against the Ottawa RedBlacks both in Week 3, but definitely Week 5. I mean, here's some ugly numbers here for the Ottawa RedBlacks, is that Trevor Harris, I'm going to say, had his worst game of the season. He was 14 for 22. He only threw for 97 yards and 2 interceptions, and the only score in this game was that Lewis Ward, the kicker for the Ottawa RedBlacks, who's had a great season. All he had was an 11-yard field goal, and that was early in the second half when Ottawa had the ball to start the second half. So it was definitely the Calgary Stampeders dominated the season series, especially in Week 5 here. But excuse me, the recurring theme here being that the defense definitely had their way with the Ottawa RedBlacks and suppressed much of Trevor Harris's air attack. So we'll see what happens as we get to the Grey Cup here on Sunday. But I mean, this happened at the early in the season, and you can almost throw that out the window too, because Calgary was done with Ottawa in July here. But anyway, the next phase of this video here is we're going to talk about some playoff history here. And this actually would be including this year, this is the 4th time that Calgary is playing Ottawa for the Grey Cup. I'm counting all of Ottawa football history here. But most recently here, in 2006, a couple of years ago, the 104th Grey Cup at Toronto at BMO Field, the Ottawa RedBlacks pulled off the upset by beating the Calgary Stampeders 39-33 in overtime. That was the game that Henry Burris had a monster game, over 400 yards passing, and the Calgary Stampeders had a slow start. Getting back in the second half, and could have still almost won it, but fortunately went to overtime and couldn't pull it off in overtime. And then after that, you have to go all the way back to 1968. This was the 56th Grey Cup in Toronto by that Exhibition Stadium. The Ottawa Rough Riders, in case if you're not familiar with the CFL, the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, and there were 2 teams named the Rough Riders. The Saskatchewan Rough Riders, the nickname is in one word, while Ottawa's Rough Riders was 2 words. I know, confusing. Now you got a 19 league and 2 teams with relatively the same name, but that's what I'm going to say. The Ottawa Rough Riders beat the Calgary Stampeders in the 56th Grey Cup in 1968. This was also a close game. It was 24-21 for Ottawa. And then you go all the way back to 1948, the 36th Grey Cup, also in Toronto. So this is the first time that Calgary and Ottawa will be playing for the Grey Cup, not in Toronto, but this one was at Varsity Stadium, and actually the Calgary Stampeders won their first franchise Grey Cup with a 12-7 win over the Ottawa Rough Riders. So all-time Grey Cup records here. Actually, there were 3 Ottawa-based teams that played for the Grey Cup, and so this is the Ottawa RedBlacks' 3rd chip to the Grey Cup here. They're 1-1, and they last won it in 2016, their only time. This reincarnation of the Ottawa franchise. If you look at the Ottawa Rough Riders, they were 9-6 overall, and their last win from that team was in 1976. So it was definitely a big deal that Ottawa went 40 years in between Grey Cup wins, because there was definitely a big celebration in Ottawa there a couple years ago. There was the Ottawa Renegades from 2002 to 2005, and didn't work out. But that team never made the playoffs, so they didn't have a competitive team, and ownership failed them there, so there was no Ottawa Renegades in the playoffs, never mind playing for the Grey Cup. And actually there was a team called the Ottawa Senators, not the hockey team, but there was an Ottawa Senators team that won 2 Grey Cups in back-to-back years, going back to 1925 and 1926. So Ottawa has definitely been represented in the Grey Cups and different teams. And then the Calgary Stampeders overall, they were 7-9. Their last win happened in 2014 in Vancouver. So I'm going to say I recommend you go to check out the Wikipedia page. You can see a list of all the Grey Cup champions there, especially the early Grey Cups where there were varsity teams and all evolved from rugby. So you can see all the list of champions from the first one to the 105th one. You can definitely see some interesting team there. That's where I got some of these Ottawa teams from. So, Ottawa, it started out in Eastern Canada, so you'll see some interesting Eastern Canadian teams that, maybe the same city got represented, but not by the franchise that's representing them now. So, all the history, all the numbers I've given, or all the records and that. Now this is the part of the video where I'll actually start breaking down the facets of the game here. I go with a combination of CFL.ca's article and come to my conclusions as a fan myself, where I think each team has an edge. So starting at quarterback here, the key position, you got Bo Levi Mitchell for Calgary and Trevor Harris for Ottawa. And I personally can't give anyone the edge here this one, because both quarterbacks are capable of putting up big numbers here. I believe Trevor Harris was 3rd in the league, or I know Trevor Harris and Bully have mentioned we're third and fourth in league, through over 5,000 yards passing throughout the season here. So I think both of these guys are capable of putting up big numbers. It all depends on the other side of the ball, as you found out, or as I said when I was looking back at the season series here. So running back, you got Don Jackson for the Calgary Stampeders, and you got William Powell for the Ottawa RedBlacks. Definitely you got to give the edge to William Powell here. He was only a few yards behind Andrew Harris, the leading rusher of the CFL, and William Powell is definitely a threat in the ground here, so I definitely got to give the edge to Ottawa there. So when we look at receivers here, Ottawa has their 3,000-yard receivers with Greg Ellenson, Brad Snuffley, and Dante Spencer. Plus RJ Harris also had a big game here and there for the Ottawa RedBlacks. Harris to Harris, fitting no relation, but he also had a big game in the Eastern Final. Calgary still has guys like Eric Rogers, Chris Matthews has been a nice pickup, and I still might say maybe DeVaris Daniels. I mean, he was practicing with the team, and in fact, even Mark Michelle was practicing with the team before the Western Final there, but neither one of them drew into the lineup. I mean, you have some ratios, but rushed as well. So, but that being said, no matter who Calgary ultimately dresses, who's healthy and available, I'm still going to give the edge to the Ottawa RedBlacks when it comes to the receivers, because they got three guys who had over 1,000 yards receiving, and some of our best receivers are on the shelf here and won't be available for the Grey Cup. So the next part we'll look at is the offensive line here, and I think this is a pretty close matchup when you look at both sides of the ball here. I mean, Ottawa's got Canadian talent that provides protection up front, but Calgary also has some solid veterans, and I think the big difference for Calgary here over Ottawa is they got Derek Dennis, who was a big signing in the offseason, and Calgary, despite having some injuries throughout the season here, has a lot of the fewest sacks in the league. So when it comes to the defensive line here, I would actually give Calgary the edge here. So now let's look at the defensive side of the ball here, and you might figure out who's going to have the edge here in many categories here. So when it comes to the defensive line here, Calgary features Micah Johnson, who had 14 sacks in the regular season, and Jaguar Davis, he's still fresh off of his big performance in the Western Final here. Ottawa, as a defensive line, actually has not recorded any sacks the last few games, so easily the Calgary Stampeders have the edge in that category. When it comes to linebackers, well, you're going to still get a lot of Mr. Singleton, Alex Singleton, and Jameer Thurman leading the way. Ottawa does have Karius Hebert and the longtime veteran, but they also employ guys like Kevin Brown and Avery Williams, and they also picked up Chris Aki at the deadline, but I think the combination of just Alex Singleton and Jameer Thurman definitely gives Calgary the edge there. So then when it comes to defensive backs, well, Deontay Evans, Emmanuel Davis, I mean, they've been solid all season, but they definitely had big games in the Western Final. Almost had a couple interceptions there that didn't quite work out, but they also got Brandon Smith, who's still the only guy on the team that was on the 08 and 14 team. Well, Ottawa, I mean, they do have Anton Pernod, who's definitely one of the best defensive backs, and you still have Shea, Baltimore and Kiafi, and who the heck knows about Jonathan Rose here, but I got to give Calgary the edge here for, got to watch out. Trevor Harris is going to have to watch out for our D-backs there. And then the return game here, hopefully Terry Williams will be available for the Calgary Stampeders here, because he had a shoulder injury and didn't draw on the lineup, and Romar Morris, he took a bad hit there. He was literally carried off the field there, and if you follow Mark Steven, the sports broadcaster, on Facebook, who is the voice of the Calgary Stampeders here, he's he doesn't sound positive that Romar Morris is going to be available next season at all. So that was a pretty bad injury he took there. But hopefully Calgary Terry Williams, but they do play guys like Tunde did at Adeleke as well. But Ottawa, they got Deontay Spencer, who led the league in all-purpose yards, so he's a threat on the receiving. He's definitely a threat on the return there. Ottawa's got the edge there, so that could, could potentially swing the games here if there's any big plays on special teams for field position, or maybe bail out the offense or defense at certain times. So Ottawa's got the edge when it comes to the return game here. And then when it comes to the kicking game, both teams have a punter and a kicker here. Calgary's got Rob Maber and Rene Paredes, and Rob Maber is definitely one of the top punters in the league for trying to positional punt, and then Rene Paredes is quite accurate. Counteract that with Richie Loney, the punter for the Ottawa RedBlacks, and mention Lewis Ward, who has been money all season kicking field goals. But I should mention that both Rene Paredes and Lewis Ward proved that they were human last week in their respective finals and actually missed a field goal here. So when he looks at the overall kicking game for both Calgary and Ottawa, I don't think anyone's got the edge there. I think I'd be comfortable with either player as a kicker or punter at certain aspects of the game here, so I don't give anyone the edge there. So now, this is part of the video here where I'll break down and bring out a few points on this team will win if. So, Ottawa. I think the Ottawa RedBlacks will win if Trevor Harris can escape Calgary's defense, something that didn't happen during the regular season, but this was in July. This is the end of November. I'm going to say Ottawa will win if William Powell has a big game on the ground. I'm going to say if William Powell outruns Calgary's run game altogether. And going back to Deontay Spencer. How big of a game does Deontay Spencer have on receiving and special teams? I gotta say he's definitely one of the factors that could break the game open here, both I'd say receiving and special teams. And I'm gonna say, could the RedBlacks defense step it up a notch and match Calgary's defense? I think if the Ottawa RedBlacks defense has an awesome all-around game, this will definitely be a much closer game and maybe pull off the upset. The Calgary Stampeders will win the Grey Cup if, I got to mention this point, first and foremost, is if they can overcome some Grey Cup demons from the past. If they can forget, the heartbreaking last 4 minutes last year in Ottawa against Toronto, and if they can forget, the overtime loss that happened 2 years ago in Toronto. I think it's up here, right? Part of it for the Calgary Stampeders is if they can overcome some demons that, because the Calgary Stampeders have been the cream of the crop here the last several years, and as nice as it is to get to the Grey Cup, it's also great to be on the right side of the Grey Cup, especially when you're losing to a team that either was barely 500 or just under 500. So they need to overcome some Grey Cup demons here. And I'm going to say Calgary will win if Trevor Harris, if our defense is all over his kitchen again. And they definitely showed that in weeks 3 and 5. If Trevor Harris has a frustrating game, can't find his receivers, is on his butt. If the defense shows up again, like they did last week in the Western Final, and pretty much all season, the only game that I think that the defense might have had a rough game was the Labor Day rematch, but defense was thrown out the window that game for both sides. I'm going to say Calgary will win if someone steps up on receiver. Eric Rogers did. Could, let's say Tavares Daniels gets something in if he has a big game, or how about our lesser-known non-imports, Jordan Breskison, Lamar Durant? Someone will have to step up big for the Calgary Stampeders in receiving, like they have up to this point, Chris Matthews. That's what I think it's going to take for Calgary to win this one. And I'm going to say the last part, win the giveaway takeaway battle. Don't turn the ball over more than the other team. More often than not, you win, and that definitely played a role in the last two Grey Cups going back to the Demons there, as that Calgary turned the ball over more than they got the ball. So I think that's those are going to be the factors for both teams here. So look at the weather forecast here. I don't think it should play too much of a factor here. I mean, it's not shorts and t-shirt weather, but there's Environment Canada's calling for sunny, high of -6, but this game won't start until 4 p.m. Mountain Time. They're still saying clear and -8, so let's say it's going to be -7 in a packed Commonwealth Stadium, 60,000 plus screaming fans. Should be one heck of an experience. No snow. I mean, weather won't be a factor. Just, bundle up. But, weather won't be too dark, won't be too wet, messy, too wet, too cold. So, let's see how that plays out. So, who do I think is ultimately going to win the 106th Grey Cup, and how confident am I in that decision here? I mean, I'm damned if I do, and if I'm damned if I don't. I have my Stampeders gear on, but I always wear my Stampeders gear on with every Grey Cup I go to, regardless if we're in it or not. But I think the third time's the charm that my Calgary Stampeders will go on to win the 106th Grey Cup with this group of guys. I mean, the defense, but I'm only going to give them a 55% confidence here that the Calgary Stampeders will win the 106th Grey Cup, because all the factors that I mentioned here, I think this is definitely going to be a much closer matchup. Well, with the regular season series happening back in July there, and, all the naysayers, all the stuff that, everyone says they don't read the paper or on social media, but the players do. They're just not going to tell the media that they read all the stuff that's on there, but, the Calgary Stampeders are definitely need to, overcome some demons here, and I think this team is finally going to do it, and, being in Edmonton here, and we'll see if all fans are probably still going to be cheering for Ottawa, because they like seeing my team being so strong in the regular season fail, and this still feels like enemy territory here, and I'll manage to survive. I've always survived my trip up in Edmonton wearing red, but that's my preview of the 106th Grey Cup here up in Edmonton against the Calgary Stampeders and the Ottawa RedBlacks. If you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video. And there might be some videos I will post throughout Grey Cup week here, but if you're at the Grey Cup Festival, enjoy, represent your team, be proud the team you cheer for, show your colors, and keep it all safe and fun. And I'll do my part. I always proudly represent my Calgary Stampeders there or not, but I'm definitely ready to finally be on the right side of the Grey Cup, just like I experienced in 2014 in Vancouver. But this will definitely mend some heartbreak if we happen to win here. But as I always say, I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy the Grey Cup, enjoy the game, and thanks for watching all my previews up to this point.